Hello, dear CSS aspirants. Welcome to our channel CSS Maverick for the subject of gender studies. In this series of lectures, we will be covering gender studies subject according to the syllabus of CSS given by FPSC. So, today our first lecture is about Introduction to Gender Studies. Let's move towards the outline of today's lecture. First of all, we will discuss what is gender. Then, what is gender studies? Different terms used in gender studies. Difference between gender and women studies. Multidisciplinary nature of gender studies. Autonomy versus integration debate in gender studies. And at the end we will discuss status of gender studies in Pakistan. Now let's start with the first heading, which is, what is gender? Gender refers to the characteristics of women, men, girls and boys that are socially constructed. This includes norms, behaviors and roles associated with being a woman, man, girl or boy, as well as relationships with each other. As a social construct, gender varies from society to society and can change over time. Gender is hierarchical and produces inequalities that intersect with other social and economic inequalities. Let's discuss. What is gender studies? Gender studies is an interdisciplinary field that focuses on the complex interaction of gender with other identity markers such as race, ethnicity, sexuality, nation, and religion. Gender studies is a field of study that looks at the world from the gender perspective. This means that while studying something, the distribution of resources within a household, a social unit like a caste group, a bill placed before Parliament, a development project, or the classification of different species, is done in a manner that takes into account the fact that different genders exist in the world. Gender studies look at how the norms and patterns of behavior associated with masculinity and femininity come into being. It studies the features of these norms and patterns, which traits are considered masculine, which feminine, and why. How do stereotypical models of men and women develop? How do they change over time, and what factors contribute to changes? Also, and very importantly, what impact do such stereotypes have upon actually existing men and women? This last point, that gender studies also has a focus upon actually existing men and women, is significant because, within gender studies, there is a recognition that men and women do not exist in isolation from their other social roles and positions. A woman is not only a woman, within our society, she also has a certain class position, caste position, religious identity, sexual identity, and many more. All of these factors impact her life, therefore while studying her life, all these factors need to be taken into consideration. Now coming over to different terms used in gender studies. Gender refers to the socially constructed roles, behaviors, activities, and attributes that a given society considers appropriate for men and women. Sex refers to the biological and physiological characteristics that define men and women. Gender mainstreaming is an approach to policy making that takes into account both women's and men's interests and concerns. The concept of gender mainstreaming was first introduced at the 1985 Nairobi World Conference on Women. Gender stereotypes are simplistic generalizations about the gender attributes, differences, and roles of individuals and/or groups. Stereotypes can be positive or negative, but they rarely communicate accurate information about others. Gender roles. A gender role is a way of appearing and behaving that meets cultural expectations based on an individual's gender. Gender relations refer to relations between men and women that are socially determined by culture, religion, or socially acceptable ways of thinking or being. Patriarchy is a social system in which men hold primary power and predominate in roles of political leadership, moral authority, social privilege and control of property. Matriarchy, social system in which females hold primary power and predominate in roles of political leadership, moral authority, social privilege and control. Feminism. Feminism is an ideological and political movement that seeks equality and equity for women in all aspects, including social, political, personal, and economic realms. Women empowerment. It is the process of empowering women in every aspect of life. Gender discrimination. Gender discrimination, also known as sexual discrimination, is any action that specifically denies opportunities, privileges, or rewards to a person, or a group, because of gender. Masculinity. Masculinity, also called manhood or manliness, is a set of attributes, behaviors, and roles associated with boys and men. Femininity. Femininity, also called womanliness or girlishness, is a set of attributes, behaviors, and roles generally associated with women and girls. Gender equity. Gender equity means fairness of treatment for men and women according to their respective needs. Through equity, the goal of gender equality can be achieved. Genderqueer, an individual whose identity is outside what is generally accepted as part of the gender binary. They tend to view the dominant beliefs about sex, gender, and desire determined by society as problematic. Third gender, an individual who identifies with any other gender that is not either man or woman. Now, the next heading is Difference BW Gender and Women's Studies. The key difference between gender and women's studies is that women's studies primarily focus on women while gender studies focus on women's studies, men's studies as well as queer studies. Both gender and women's studies are often used interchangeably, but both these disciplines have major differences. Let's see the differences in tabular form. Gender studies emerged in 1990s due to the expansion of the scope of women's studies, while women's studies came into being as a result of the second wave of feminism. It is a broader discipline as compared to women's studies. It focuses not only on women but also studies queer theory and masculinity. While women's studies is an interdisciplinary program of studies or an academic field focusing on women's roles in society, culture, history, and literature. Gender studies is the academic study of the phenomena of gender. It tries to analyze those traits and characteristics that a person, on the basis of his/her gender, is expected to perform. While in women's studies, women are kept at the center while discussing the topics of health, politics, work and literature. Gender studies discuss men and the third gender as equally as women. It talks about LGBT rights and other rights related to all the genders. While women's studies focuses on the fuller understanding of women in society but also stresses on the need of new criteria and methods for assessing the status of women in all spheres of life. The gender studies are always considered the issues at the front desk in which the both male and female are considerable for the discourse analysis. While women's studies pondered upon the women's studies, history of women at this universe and women's struggle for freedom so that the issues could meet the debate desk as soon as possible. Now, coming over to the next heading, which is the multidisciplinary nature of gender studies. A discipline is a field of study. So a multidisciplinary, or interdisciplinary, course is a team-taught course through which one is asked to understand a single subject as it's seen by two or more traditional disciplines. It means involving different subjects of study in one activity. We study different subjects in gender studies to understand the issues and problems related to gender in our societies. This is why gender studies is called a multidisciplinary subject. Gender studies is an interdisciplinary field of inquiry that draws on philosophy, anthropology, political science, history, sociology, psychology, biology, science studies, literary and cultural studies, queer studies, and many other areas, including linguistics. For example, we study our society in sociology and then link our norms and culture to different genders. Similarly, we link political science when we talk about legal identities, rights and duties of a gender. In gender studies, we study different gender-related issues, such as gender discrimination, gender-based violence, gender inequality etc., that are being encountered not only by third world countries, such as Afghanistan, but also by the modern world, such as United States. These issues are being solved by making different efforts through different movements around the world and also by integrating this discipline with other fields of social sciences to develop new theories and ideas so that people will come to know about the importance of gender equality in our society. The next heading of our today's lecture is Autonomy versus Integration Debate in Gender Studies. Autonomy means independency while integration means uniting or merging two or more. This is an ongoing debate in several feminist circles. The feminists argue that gender studies should be autonomous or it should be integrated with other disciplines/departments. To understand this debate, we need to understand the basic concept of autonomy and integration first. These are two opposing views. This sketch shows the difference between autonomy and integration. Such as autonomy refers to the state of independence and self-determination in an individual, a group, or a society. While the action or process of successfully joining or mixing with a different group of people is called integration. Autonomy debate. The proponents of the autonomy debate say that gender is an autonomous discipline that cannot be studied with other fields of studies. They give several reasons to reinforce its independency. Reasons. The proponents of autonomy debate argue that the main idea of this discipline is to address the gender-related issues, such as gender discrimination and gender-based violence. But if this discipline is integrated with other disciplines, then the main goal of achieving gender equality might die. Hence the subject should be studied independent of other disciplines. The feminists might have difficulty in carrying out their campaigns and tasks due to interruption or clash with other disciplines and their ideas. The probable presence of some anti-feminists in other groups or departments will cause hindrances in the work of feminists. Integration debate. The proponents of integration debate argue that gender studies should be integrated with other disciplines/departments. It should have a connection with other social sciences because women or any other gender is not exclusive, they have to work inclusively. Reasons are. They say that by integrating gender studies with other disciplines or fields of studies, progress can be made rapidly. It will help to address gender-related issues with the mutual effort of all the related/linked disciplines. Integration of gender studies with other disciplines will open new ways for achieving the goal of gender equality because it will give weightage to the subject if this subject is linked with some major discipline such as political science. This will help to ascertain legal rights when linked with politics. Theorists from other disciplines can help feminists to develop new theories according to the needs of modern times that can open up new gates of knowledge. Moving forward to our next heading, which is Status of Gender Studies in Pakistan. The discipline of women's study emerged in the West, especially after the second wave of feminism, while gender studies emerged in the 1990s due to the expansion of the scope of women's studies. The basic purpose behind the creation of these fields of study was to acknowledge the importance of women as well as all genders in society. In Pakistan, both the disciplines got roots in the early 90s and since then it has been taught in different universities across the country. Origin of women/gender studies in Pakistan. In Pakistan, women's issues got much public attention in the 1970s due to the sincere efforts of some committed feminists of that time, which resulted in the creation of the Women's Division. In 1989, the division decided the opening of centers of women's studies in some universities. In response to their application, Pakistan's Ministry to Women's Development established the Center of Excellence for Women's Studies in 1989 in 5 public universities. Status of gender studies in Pakistan. Pakistan's Ministry to Women's Development established Center of Excellence for Women's Studies in 1989 in 5 public universities. Since then, the discipline of women's and gender studies has been taught regularly and the number of enrollments in these fields has increased over time. The establishment of the Center of Excellence for Women's Studies has not only helped in elaborating gender issues in society but also has suggested many steps for their solutions. Both theoretical and practical struggle has not only produced great feminist leaders but also has led to the development of many new feminist organizations in the country such as Circle Women and Women in Struggle for Empowerment, WISE. Due to several feminist movements and NGOs in Pak, this subject is gaining popularity. The feminist organizations are helping in the empowerment of women in Pakistani society. In this regard, many indoor work programs such as sewing, cooking, teaching etc., have been introduced from time to time. Different universities in Pakistan now have separate departments of gender studies where several academic programs, BS, MSc etc., are being offered. The prominent universities are Quaid-e-Azam University in Islamabad and Punjab University in Lahore. Public awareness about women in general and maternal health care, in particular, has increased through the literary work of women's studies centers. Different universities in Pakistan and programs related to gender studies. The Center of Excellence for Women's Studies, CEWS, it is the leading center in the field of teaching and research in women's studies in Pakistan. It was established as a project in 1989 by the Ministry of Women's Development, Government of Pakistan. In 2002 center initiated an MPhil, PhD program. Some programs of women's studies and gender studies in Pakistan. Institute of Women Development Studies, University of Sindh. Women's Studies Department, Allama Iqbal Open University, 1997. Women's Research and Resource Center, Fatima Jinnah Women University, Rawalpindi. Women's Studies Center, University of Baluchistan, Quetta. Department of Women's Studies, Punjab University, Lahore. Department of Women's Studies, Peshawar University. Pakistan Journal of Women's Studies. Al-Amin is one. It is published twice a year by the Pakistan Association for Women's Studies. The first issue was published in 1994. Problems in Pakistan with respect to subject gender studies. Irrelevant theories. As the subject has emerged in the West, therefore, all the literary work and theories of the discipline have been formulated and designed from the perspective of Western culture. Pakistan is an Islamic Republic country having its own customs and traditions which contradict altogether the Western concepts about women and their freedom. Cultural variation. It is very unfortunate that despite of passing more than 3 decades since the opening of Women's Studies Center in the country, these disciplines are still taught in universities based on Western thoughts which contradict with our society. Therefore, there is a dire need for modifications of these views and ideas in the perspective of Pakistani culture and society. Dearth of local writers. In Pakistan, there is a dearth of writers who could write more books on this subject that relate to Pakistani society. Due to a lack of academic writing at the local level, the subject is being taught with the help of foreign authors' writings that do not reflect the true spirit of the subject in Pakistan. Lack of faculty. Like writers, there is a lack of teaching faculty as well because the subject is not very popular in Pakistan. Misconceptions about subject. There is also a misconception about this subject that this subject is not meant for males as it only talks about women-related issues. But this is not a valid concept as gender studies is the study of all existing genders in this world. At the end, few recommendations. Active collaboration between the various departments/centers and institutes teaching women's studies in Pakistan to share expertise. Special grants for library development in women's studies should be instituted. Concentrated efforts should be made to introduce women's studies at the undergraduate level. Efforts should be made to develop the research and teaching capacities of the Faculty of Gender Studies. Special funds should be made available by the EC for those prepared to undertake this arduous exercise. With this, I come over to the end of our today's lecture. Like, subscribe for future notifications of different lectures.